defining what the consequences are if you stay right where you're at. And maybe there are none, right? And that's what holds a lot of people back, is there are no consequences. But if you dig deep enough, the consequences oftentimes are unfulfilled potential. That's a big one, right? I mean, that's you hear it all the time, the stories of the folks that are dying and on their deathbed, and what they talk about regretting the most is not living up to their potential. Welcome to Burning the Ships podcast, and I'm your host, Jason Seward, and today I am flying solo again. Like I mentioned a couple weeks ago in my last solo episode, I'm going to be sprinkling more of these in from time to time, probably do one a month or something like that. I might do back-to-back weeks if I get inspired by an idea or something of that nature. But moving forward, like I said, you'll see more of these solo episodes where I cover just various topics that are on my mind or that I'm inspired to talk about. So this week, we're going to dive in kind of like the real reason a lot of people don't take action, in whatever area that might be. It could be business, it could be health related, whatever the case may be. But we're going to talk about that today, and kind of dive in. Again, like I say all the time when I do these are my perspectives. I'm not married to any of these ideas. These are just kind of my thoughts and perspectives through my experience, observations, stuff like that. And I like to make the connection to, real experience that I've been through in my life. So it's easier for me to relate and kind of make these topics a little more understandable kind of from my lens. So, and as we're talking about like taking action, that is, not, I don't take a lot of perfect action. I don't take any perfect action, but there's no shortage of action taken in my life. And a lot of that, I might swing 100 times and only hit 3 home runs, so I attempt a lot of things and throw a lot of stuff at the wall to see if it sticks. But I'm able to do that because I have a really good relationship with fear and risk and things like that. So I'm going to dive into all those things in today's episode. So, most people say they're not taking action because they're scared, but in my opinion, it's not necessarily fear. I don't think that's true. I think fear, it isn't the real problem. People do scary things every day when they have to, right? Most people are stuck because they're comfortable and they're unclear, and there's no real tangible consequences to the action that they could be taken, right? So they can see where action could lead somewhere positive, but they're comfortable where they're at, at their current state or their current position or whatever the case it is, where they're at in their life. So they're comfortable with it, right? They're not very clear on what that action can be to get them unstuck. And stuck really isn't, I don't know if that's the right word, because they might be content where they're at, but they know there's more out there for them. That there's better things you can do to maybe improve your situation and the situation of your family and the folks you love. But yet, if you don't do anything, there's no real consequences to that. So that's where a lot of folks get stuck. So, like fear, it's situational, right? Most people don't lack the courage; they just lack the urgency, right? There's nothing creating that urgency, and what becomes the trap is the comfort of the situation they're in. So, like a lot of times, in most cases, a decent life keeps people stuck right there, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Please don't interpret this as like I think people oftentimes think that maybe I have the mindset of like I feel like everybody should be trying to go after it and get more and get more and get more out of life. I wish everybody did have that mindset, but I don't feel like it's necessarily a bad thing if folks are comfortable, content, and just happy being right where they're at. That's nothing wrong with that at all, in my opinion. But I do think that oftentimes that comfort is the trap and what prevents people from really achieving more out of their life, more for their families, more for themselves, more for their well-being and stuff like that. So like I said, a good life, a decent life, it keeps a lot of people stuck. And really nothing is bad enough in their current situation to force any type of change, to force any type of action. And I think there's three reasons. I'm gonna go over those reasons in today's episode. So number one, it's a lack of clarity, right? You can't attack something that you can't define. So you might feel that, like that feeling of like, okay, I'm comfortable, but I could ride it out here and be okay. But there's something more. You just can't really define it. It's not, you don't have a vision or clarity around what it is, right? So like your goals and your visions are vague, and when things like that are vague, it leads to zero action, right? You can't really define it, so you don't have anything to work towards. So you really just level out and stay right there because you don't know the actions to take to get you to the vision that you can't really see. But you know it's there. You just don't dig deep enough to find out what that is. Okay. Another reason, so lack of clarity. Another reason is there's too many options, right? So oftentimes, most times, when you have a lot of information and a lot of option, it leads to paralysis in your thinking, right? It just shuts you down, right? So you might be sitting in one place, there's a better place or another place you're attracted to, you want to go to. You can't quite see it, so the lack of clarity around that. But that place, it might be 50 different options that can get you to that place, right? So sometimes it's you don't have the clarity, and then beyond that, you don't have it's so many options available for to take that next step. You just freeze up. You're paralyzed, right? So you you really it's not more options that you need. Everybody has plenty of options. You need that clarity, and you need to pick one or two and commit to it, right? So it's a lack of commitment through the fact that there's too many options out there to commit to. So that's number two. And then number three, and I think this is the biggest one, there's no consequences to not taking action. I, I, and I'll use my example, and I'll get more into this a little bit, here in a few minutes. But when I worked for years in my insurance career, right, and it was a very good career. For, going on how careers are defined, right? Like successful or good or however you want to define it. But it wasn't like a physically demanding career. I made plenty of money. I had pretty good flexibility and freedom to kind of come and go as I pleased and kind of all those things. But it wasn't mine. I didn't own it. I was working for a corporation, so I didn't have the ultimate freedom and flexibility. But there were no consequences for me staying right where I was. None, zero. Actually, in fact, there were there were potential consequences for me leaving that, right, from a financial standpoint or a job security standpoint. But to stay there, it was very comfortable. If I decided to stay there and ride it out for the rest of my career until my late 50s, early 60s, I would have been just fine. There was no consequences to doing that, right? So potentially nothing had to change, right? Nothing had to change. It was okay. But I had this desire for more, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what it would have taken outside of like my mindset and what most people do, is they wait till things become painful, uncomfortable, um, almost to a point they can't bear it before the action is taken, right? So they're forced into taking action. That action almost becomes automatic when it becomes painful or necessary, right? I was not at that point. There was nothing painful or, any reasons that were forcing me to take the action of leaving that career and pursuing all my real estate goals and stuff like that. So when I went from the insurance industry, working for a corporation, it was a W-2 career, again, high income, all those things, into full-time entrepreneurship. I had built that on the side, but it wasn't at the level of income and security that W-2 career was by any stretch of the imagination, right? But I could see a vision. Okay. And back to what I said earlier, I didn't lack that clarity. I was very clear on what I wanted. I was very clear on what I wanted for myself, my family, and all of that. So because I had that clarity, I was able to define what it would take to achieve that vision that I had, that goal that I had, right? So I didn't have a lack of clarity. Once I had clarity in place, that kind of opened my mind up like, okay, this is possible. Okay. And I was able to attack it. It wasn't vague. It wasn't unclear to me what I wanted and how I wanted to get there. Right. I, it wasn't a lot of options, right? So I mentioned my number two thing above was there a lot of people just have too many options. Because they don't have clarity, they just have all kinds of options. Well, it wasn't a lot for me. It was either stay where I was or build up a very specific path in real estate, right? Now that has nuance and a lot of variables within that and how we can build it, but I saw the path. I always talk about burning the ships. You don't want to burn the ships until you've built another ship, right? Well, we hadn't built that ship, but we could see a very clear vision of what it looked like. So I had that. And and again, um, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't because I had to do that. It was just I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted more, and that would allowed me to have clarity around that action. So did that come with a lot of pressure? Did it come with a lot of doubt? Like removing the safety net, removing all the comfortability in our lives. And when I say our lives, mine and my family, sure. Like there was a lot of pressure and doubt and all those things, but what ultimately helped me work through all that were the things above, right? I had clarity. I knew what that looked like. I had a good vision, so that gave me the all the ammo I needed in order to pull the trigger and take the action. Okay. So it once I once I made up my mind again with clarity and I knew what option I was going to take, there was no looking back. It was just do it, like take the action. Now, if I stayed right there with all that on my mind, that would have been an unfulfilled life for me, right? So everything would have been fine. The money would have been there, the lifestyle, all that stuff, but I would have felt unfulfilled for the next 20, 30 years of my life. And I was not going to do that. Um, there's practical application to this, okay? So again, going back to clarity, you've got to, in order to take action, and I've kind of been talking about my career and my transition from that career to where I'm at in real estate now. But we can talk about anything. We can talk about health, right? So let's go there and kind of segue into how that looks like from a health standpoint, right? A lot of folks, most folks in life go through these ups and downs with their health journey, right? It might be weight, it might be, their cardiovascular health, it might be their mobility, things like that, their mental health even. And you you get to a point where the only way to fix it is through taking action. So that when it comes to health, action oftentimes means doing some hard things, right? Some physical action. Like that action is going out, going for a run, going to the gym, doing some squats, doing some push-ups, whatever it is, it's hard, right? So you're in a position where let's just use weight. That's the most common one where somebody might be 30 to 50 pounds overweight, right? And they've just gotten through that way through time and not taking action, right? So they need to make a change. In order to make that change, they got to have some clarity, right? Back to what I was talking about earlier. That clarity is a vision of what you want to do. So you got to define that. And if I define it, I can say, all right, I want to lose 40 pounds. Okay. So then you've got to know what those steps are, right? Again, I mentioned it, a lot of people get hung up because there's too many options. So they freeze. It's paralysis. No, I mean, there's a lot of options to lose weight. You can do it. You can take a shot now. You can get surgery. You can do all that. But the healthy options would be I need to control my diet and I need to control my or add in more exercise, right? So the actions are clear, right? There's only a few ways to do it the right way. And there they are. So I have clarity around the vision. I want to lose 40 pounds. And now here are the defined actions that I'm going to take. And the third piece is if I stay where I'm at, yes, it's comfortable. I could ride this out, but there are direct, real consequences to staying overweight, right? The real consequences are potential diabetes, heart issues, all kinds of stuff that can, mobility issues, quality of life, lifespan, health span, all that. So it's a real life or death situation in most cases. So there's your comfortability. Yes, it's comfortable, but there's a consequence to staying comfortable. So it checks all the boxes. I have clarity around what needs to happen. I need to lose the weight. I don't have a lot of options. It's two things I can do. I can eat right and I can exercise. So there they are. I can define that. And then there's a consequence if I don't do these things. Okay. So those three things, it checks all the boxes. Now I have to take action, right? There's no fear involved. And that's where I started. A lot of people say I don't take action because I'm scared. Scared of what? Like people, you've got to stop blaming fear, right? Fear is in your brain, but you can work through fear by going through these exercises. And I'm not talking about physical exercises. I'm talking about like really defining what it is you want, defining what the consequences are if you stay right where you're at. And maybe there are none, right? And that's what holds a lot of people back is there are no consequences. But there, if you dig deep enough, the consequences oftentimes are um, unfulfilled potential. That's a big one, right? I mean that's there you hear it all the time, the stories of the folks that are dying and on their deathbed, and what they talk about regretting the most is not living up to their potential. I was recently at a real estate conference, the DealMaker conference in Richmond, and Chuck Glover, who many of the listeners know, he's from the Richmond market, but he got up there and he was talking about this exact thing that the, you know, when people look back on unfulfilled lives and unfulfilled potential, that's their biggest regret. I should have done this. I wish I would have done this sooner. I wish I would have taken this leap of faith. I wish I would have done more of this with my family and stuff like that. It's never, I wish I would have made more money. Never. And so I thought that he played a video that really, for me, it stirred up a lot of emotions, but it fit his story well. But it kind of goes to this point. If you're comfortable and you can't really identify what the consequences are to staying where you're at. And again, this goes in professionally, personally, whatever it is. If you can't identify those consequences, then it makes it easy to stay there, right? So sometimes you got to dig deeper in what those consequences are. And the ultimate consequence is unfulfilled potential and dying or getting to your last breaths, realizing what if? What if I had done this, right? I don't want to live that way. Who wants to, get to the end of life and think back to, gosh, I could have done so much more. I could have impacted so many more people. I could have lived my last years a lot more healthy and mobile and capable and all those things. So that's not a fear thing, right? Fear doesn't create that. Fear doesn't hold you back. Although a lot of people want to blame fear, it is just a lack of clarity. They're too comfortable. They don't dig deep enough to really define the consequences of staying there, and all those things. So, like in most cases, when it comes to lack of action, it's not because you're stuck. It's because you're comfortable, right? And you're not digging deep enough to really define what those consequences and get clarity around all that. So, you know, it's most people, well, I would say it's you've got to create and find the consequences, right? You've got to, and then put some deadlines around it, around taking action. Put some accountability around it. Put some pressure, whether it's financial or health or whatever. Build all these things in. Um, and if you're able to do that and surround yourself with the right people and the right circles and the right discipline and all those things, it will force action. Like if you don't take action, you're going to go to bed every night regretting not taking action. You're going to wake up every morning regretting that you didn't take action, or not knowing what to do, and it's just an unfulfilled life and way to live. So all that's to say is, like, when it comes to action taking, um, it I don't unfortunately, I see a lot of people, in my day-to-day life that are just, they're not even spinning wheels. Their foot's not on the gas. They are literally just sitting where they're at, doing the same thing over and over and over. And yes, it might be comfortable, but it's kind of in every way. They might be comfortable in their career, but it's the same kind of comfort as it would be if I went and sat on my couch, which I wouldn't be comfortable with this, but a lot of people would be. But sitting on their couch eating ice cream every day, watching movie after movie, binging Netflix and all that stuff, that's comfortable, right? But there is so much more that can be done, and there's so many consequences on the back end of that comfortability. And people just do not think that way. And they say that I don't think that way because I'm scared. I don't know what to do, right? I'm scared. You're not scared. You're comfortable. You don't have clarity around the next steps, and you don't have a vision, and you have too many options, right? You just can't dial it in. So that's where I would start. That'd be my advice for anybody, and on any action you want to take. I've talked more about like careers and health, but it can go for anything, right? It might be, um, I'll give a real example I went through. This is more of a hobby type thing and a health type thing, but back in 2020, um, my JJ started first, but Emma was right behind him. But my kids started doing jujitsu, right? And now at that time, COVID, we were in the middle of COVID. My family, and looking back on it, I'm glad we were this way. It was kind of risky at the time, but we it's not that we didn't take COVID serious, but we weren't going to let it like create fear in us where we just completely compromised everything in our lives. So the first several months, we were like everybody else, just being cautious and stuff like that. But around, I think June, July of that year of 2020, um, we were not going to play along anymore. So we had to get our kids. I mean, they weren't in school. They were not around other kids. So we had to get them into something. So we put them into jujitsu. Now, the jujitsu class, like they were having to operate kind of under the radar. So they had like paper over the windows. You couldn't really see inside because publicly, from the outside looking in, it was terrible. Kids and adults were rolling around doing jujitsu, sweating on each other and stuff like that in the height of COVID. Probably, at that time, looking back on it, it was fine. Nothing bad came of it, but at that time, it would have been frowned upon. But anyway, we decided to put our kids in it. So we started taking them, 3, 4 days a week. And I'm making this long-winded, but I'll get to my point in a minute. Um, and probably I would say 6 months into it, of me just taking them to class, like it was itching me that it was tearing me up that it was something that my kids were doing and learning that I knew nothing about, and I wanted to be more involved with it. So I started taking classes myself. So I started going to some day classes at lunchtime, and I'd go to occasional night classes, and I started getting the bug. And it was something that it was new to me, right? So was I scared to do it? Not necessarily scared. I was just uncomfortable. I've never done it. So I'm literally starting off as a white belt. And I use that white belt mentality analogy a lot, but just starting something new and challenging yourself. And that's what that was, both physically and mentally challenging to me. And I wasn't good at it at first, and I kept at it. I kept going to class. And the main thing is I wanted to show my kids that I was right there with them. Like, I'm going to do this thing that I know nothing about, and I'm trying to learn. And then that evolved where I started kind of helping teach their classes. Still didn't know much, but I was getting more and more immersed in it. And it was something new. I was overcoming that doubt. I was overcoming that fear and all that stuff. So then I had to start like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I got to take some action with it, right? So more than just showing up to class every day, I want to have an outcome on the back end of it. So I set a few goals. I wanted to get my blue belt, right? That's the big first step in jujitsu. It takes a while. It took me about a year to get that blue belt, but that was my first goal. I wanted to get in there and achieve that because I knew if I got to that level, I knew all the basic, strategy of jujitsu, and then from there it was just dialing it in and getting more and more experience to get to higher belts. But the blue one was my big one, and then eventually I wanted to compete. I wanted to do a competition right alongside my kids, right? And I'm a grown man that's never competed in anything martial arts or anything like that. So I set two goals: get my blue belt and do a competition. Well, and after about, I'd say about right at a year maybe of me doing it, I got my blue belt. So I was able to achieve that. And that was through taking action and going to class over and over and over for a year. About I averaged 3 or 4 classes a week for a solid year, and I got that blue belt. But right before getting that blue belt, my kids, or Emma, I don't think JJ, yeah, JJ didn't go, but she had a competition in New Jersey, right? And we signed her up for it, and I saw that they had an adult competition. I knew I was very close to getting my blue belt, so I was going to compete as a white belt. I was like, screw it, I'm going to do it. So we drive all the way to Jersey, compete in that. Had several matches. I think I won two and lost two. I don't remember exactly how it went down, but I did it. I went out there and I competed. I had anxiety around it. I had all these things, but it was a goal. And then came right back, and I think it was a month later, I got my blue belt. So my point there was I went brand new into something. I was comfortable. I did not need to do jujitsu. I didn't need that in my life, right? I was comfortable where I was. I was physically in pretty good shape, was exercising regularly. If anything, jujitsu kind of physically hurt me more because I was getting injured a lot in there. But I went in there, I defined something, and it was going to take action for me to do it. So those actions, number one, again, I had to have clarity around what I wanted for it. Number one, I want to show my kids I could do something brand new and hard with them. Number two, I wanted to set a goal and achieve that goal, blue belt, and competing. And number three, I wasn't overwhelmed with options. I had the clarity, I had the goal, I had the vision, and I, it was just either do it or not do it, right? So I just immersed myself and did it. So all the quote unquote fear that most people say, I'm scared to go and try this. I'm scared to do jujitsu because I don't understand and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't fear. It was no fear. It was prior to me doing it, I didn't have clarity around anything like that to chase. And then I developed that. I created that. I put accountability in place, through my coaches or through my kids or whatever it is. And I created consequences. The consequences were I had a goal in place, and if I didn't go to class and continue training and learning, the consequence was I was not going to hit a goal that I had defined and kind of put out there of my. Well, I created all this to then put me in this mindset of taking urgent action, right? I had to do these things in order to achieve the goal that I defined. So that's just another example that is unrelated to business or anything like that, and kind of related to my life. So again, kind of to wrap all this up with a call to action is like, stop blaming fear as the reason you're not taking action. And you're not stuck. You're not stuck in this place of fear. You're just comfortable, and that's all it is. So you got to find out what the consequences are of staying where you are. And that might be mental, it might be physical, it might be financial, but figure out that what it is, get clarity around it, and then things start to become a little more clear and urgent for you. And like, you know, another thing that could be holding you back as far as an action plan is like, are you keeping in the back of your mind always like a plan B, right? I'll start these things, but I don't have to go back. Plan B is just retreat, 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 go back to what I was doing to where I was comfortable. You got to throw that crap out of the window. Like the plan B is like practically, yes, it's okay to know where you pivot and can try something new and different and than what you're trying. But to go into it with the mindset, anything, I don't care what it is, to go into it with the mindset of, oh, if it doesn't work out, I'll just go back and do this. well, then you haven't created urgency. You haven't done anything to put pressure on yourself. You got to lose that mindset. So again, most people, they don't fail and they don't not take action because they are scared. They might think they're scared, but it is mostly because they never put themselves in a position where they have to take a shot. They have to do something, right? And sometimes you have to create that. It's not real. Like, you have to create that mentality to feel it in order to push the needle forward. So with that, I think I've rambled on this topic long enough, but it's just my thoughts around action taken. And again, it's not, I'm not sitting here saying that everybody, no matter where they're at, has to keep pushing and keep pushing. For me, I always will. Until I take my last breath, there's going to be something I'm chasing to improve myself, my situation, or those around me. I don't care what it is. It's always going to be there because that is most fulfilling to me, and that's where I'm living up to my best potential if I'm living in that mindset. And I encourage all of you to do the same. So with that, I'll wrap up another episode of Burning the Ships, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Burning the Ships. I want to give a special thanks to our sponsor, 608B Capital, helping real estate investors secure fast, reliable funding to fuel their boldest moves. If you're ready to take your investing to the next level, visit 608bcapital.com to learn more. If you found value in today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps us reach more people who are ready to burn the ships and commit fully to their goals. And don't forget to share the episode with someone who needs that extra push to take bold action. I'll leave you with this. Burning the ships isn't just about removing the option to retreat. It's about unlocking the courage to charge forward. No matter the odds, the past is behind you and the future is yours to conquer. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Burning the Ships.